This was day 550 of the Trump administration. For some perspective, Helsinki was a week ago today. For the past 3 days, the president has embarked on fresh new attacks on the Mueller investigation, a warning to Iran, and new threats to the intelligence community. Trump's renewed push comes in the wake of scathing reviews of his meeting with Vladimir Putin and subsequent walkback attempts on his comments doubting U.S. intelligence on Russia's election interference. A dozen audio tapes, at least one with Trump's voice on it, seized from his former lawyer Michael Cohen's office. They're all now in the hands of feds. The growing Mueller investigation, which will soon feature the trial of his former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. Also tonight, the Wall Street Journal says Trump's legal team is still talking to Mueller. The Journal reports it this way. Trump's legal team has submitted a counteroffer to special counsel Robert Mueller on a possible interview with the president that could allow for questions about collusion with Russia, but curtail inquiries related to obstruction of justice. As negotiations for a sit-down are set to enter their 8th month, Rudy Giuliani, a lawyer for Mr. Trump, said Monday that an interview between the special counsel and the president is still on the table. Giuliani also told the Journal, quote, the president's legal team is open to him answering questions about possible collusion with Moscow. What has the president said about that? No collusion. In his newest swipes at the Mueller investigation, Trump described it as a big hoax, as the conflicted and discredited Mueller witch hunt, and then as a disgrace to America, adding they should drop the discredited Mueller witch hunt now. Trump is also taking on a half-dozen top former intelligence officials, some big names, and looking at potentially revoking their security clearances, including former CIA director and these days NBC News and MSNBC analyst John Brennan. One thing all of these names have in common: they have all spoken out publicly against this president.
Not only is the president looking to take away Brennan's security clearance, he's also looking into the clearances of Comey, Clapper, Hayden, Rice, and McCabe. The president is exploring the mechanisms to remove security clearance because they've politicized and in some cases monetized their public service and security clearances. Making baseless accusations of improper contact with Russia or being influenced by Russia against the president is extremely inappropriate.
So just to be clear and to repeat, in addition to Brennan, the list includes former FBI Director Comey, former DNI James Clapper, former CIA Director Hayden, former National Security Advisor Susan Rice, former FBI number 2 Andrew McCabe. Two of them, Comey and McCabe, no longer have security clearances. That White House announcement followed a Twitter notice from Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky saying he'd asked the president to remove Brennan's privileges. Brennan has been vocal in his criticism of Trump's news conference with Putin. The effort to end his clearance appears to have started last week on the president's cable news network of choice.
John Brennan is an irresponsible partisan combatant who works for a cable news channel and has threatened the president on Twitter. Why in the world would he have a top secret federal security clearance?
Now, this is alarming. And if John Brennan still has top secret clearance, can he research Donald Trump? Can he research his family?
That also seems to echo what the president told CBS News last week when he named names of former intelligence officials in a list remarkably similar to what we heard today.
Do you think any intelligence agencies, U.S. intelligence agencies, are out to get you?
Well, certainly in the past, it's been terrible. You look at Brennan, you look at Clapper, you look at Hayden, you look at Comey. I have no confidence in a guy like Brennan. I think he's a total lowlife. I have no confidence in Clapper. You know, Clapper wrote me a beautiful letter when I first went to office, and it was really nice. And then all of a sudden, he's gone haywire because they got to him and they probably got him to say things that maybe he doesn't even mean. But no, I certainly don't have confidence in past people. You look at what's happened. Take a look at all of the shenanigans that have gone on. Very hard to have confidence in that group.
Which brings us to our leadoff panel on a Monday night. Peter Baker, chief White House correspondent for the New York Times, Ashley Parker, Pulitzer Prize-winning White House reporter for the Washington Post, and Jeremy Bash, former chief of staff at the CIA and Pentagon, also happens to be former counsel to the House Intelligence Committee. Jeremy, because you are the former Fed here, I'd like to begin with you. Why do we offer security clearances to former very senior ranking intelligence officials, including but not limited to our former CIA directors, once they have left office?
It's to benefit the country, Brian. It's to benefit the current occupants of the leadership offices of those agencies so that they can call their predecessors and consult on some very complex and difficult issues that those current office holders may be facing. And so it's done really to support the country. I mean, what's crazy about this move by the president, Brian, is that if he were to strip these former officials of security clearances, it wouldn't hurt those former officials much at all. Most of them are doing things kind of unrelated. It would really hurt the current agencies, and I think it's really part of a long practice dating back to the very first days of the president in office when he went to the CIA and used that memorial wall as a political prop, all through doubting the intelligence community assessments, all through his attacks on our intelligence agencies, right through this weekend when he called the whole intelligence community assessment about Russia a hoax. It's part of a long pattern and practice of attacking United States intelligence agencies.
So as an example, Jeremy, our current CIA gets a picture of the people around Kim Jong-un. A longtime former player is missing from the picture. They call Brennan and say, what were your dealings with this guy? Do you remember this guy because he's no longer part of the picture? That kind of thing?
That's a great example. Or if you're working with another intelligence service and you want some advice about how to handle some of the current players, let's say those people are still in office, and so you call your predecessor and say, hey, John, how'd you deal with this?
Okay. Ashley, you're sitting there listening to Sarah Huckabee Sanders with the rest of us, and this part of the briefing comes up, and one word stuck out at you, and that was monetize. And to hear you're telling it to one of our producers, it's one thing to criticize the president, but if he thinks you're monetizing any piece of him, by the way, monetizing the presidency is what the Trump family writ large has been accused of since he took the oath. But if he thinks you're monetizing him, that crosses a red line.
It sure does. So Sarah Sanders' whole statement jumped out at me, but you're right, specifically that word monetize. And to be clear, the president doesn't like critics. He doesn't like people who have worked for past administrations, especially President Obama. But one of the things, other again than the original sin of Russia, that just really drives him crazy is this idea that people are getting rich off of him, rich using his name, rich criticizing him. On a side note, one interesting thing I learned was that Steve Bannon, for instance, one of the reasons why he's still a persona non grata in the administration is not just that he crossed the president on Russia, but that the president believes incorrectly that Steve Bannon somehow made money off of Michael Wolff's book. And so the idea that Steve Bannon, again, got rich being critical of the administration is something that just drives him crazy. And I think the fact that Sarah used that word was incredibly telling. When you listen to other aides in this White House talk about people, especially who they think are making money with either books or television contracts, by criticizing the president, it is something that just bothers them across the board in this West Wing.
So, Peter Baker, as I mentioned, Helsinki, exactly a week ago tonight, we were talking about that. For a White House anxious to change the subject to anything but, this would make a nifty, shiny object. But how about shiny object discipline when you think about the fact that two of the names on their list, potentially getting their security clearance pulled, don't have security clearances?
Yeah, well, it's obviously not a very well thought through or researched idea at this point when you put on people who aren't actually currently having security clearances. But I don't know that it actually changes the subject. I think in some ways it actually extends it, because this is all sort of driven out of the Helsinki summit. It's driven out of the idea that this is a president who has a relationship with Russia that has been questioned, that's under investigation. What he's basically saying is, if you question me, I will find a way to penalize you for that. And so I think, in fact, it extends the questions about his relationship with Vladimir Putin rather than distracting from them. What is he so afraid of if, in fact, he doesn't have, an untoward relationship, that he would want these people to be cut off from information? He doesn't want them to have any access to classified data, and therefore it gives the impression, anyway, of somebody who's trying to punish his enemies and prevent people who might say things that he doesn't like from having information that would be based on, that would base those statements.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.